Hello, lovely people.
And for the sake of that,
this is the
I'm going to go ahead and give you
Jane Austen Book Club official cast commentary. I am the director, writer, Dan McGarry, and we're just going to go around and introduce ourselves and talk about what we did on the show. And then you guys are going to get to hear some of what happened behind the scenes for this wonderful production.
Hi, my name is Brittany. I played Prudy Brophy, the French teacher.
But I will say,
Dan is a very, very dear friend of mine and asked me to be part of this production a while ago, almost a year ago actually, and so I've been on board since the very beginning, and I'm excited to be here.
But the live stream link.
I'm Jaggy. I'm the producer / marketing person for the Jane Austen Book Club. I also play Pam, a vampire, a high school student, and Dr. Yep. So yeah, I wear very many hats in the film.
Right, I'm Zach, and I play Greg in the Jane Austen Book Club. But also my special role was making the muffins that appear during the book club that happens at Sylvia and Allegra's house when they talk about Simpsons. No. The muffins were in the first one. Jocelyn allegedly made the muffins. So actually maybe that was a bit of foreshadowing. I don't know. I'm an English teacher, so this was a whole lot of fun.
And I'm Connor. I was stage manager turned screen manager. And I basically am in charge during the show of controlling microphones for everybody and making sure that the screens stay in order. So, it's an odd stage manager's dream to have that much control over actors in a performance because they never have that much control over actors in a performance. So it was a different and weird experience, but definitely a learning experience and one that was interesting and fun to do.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and take us off the screen so you can see what's going on behind us, and we'll pop back in when we have something to tell you.
To happiness, I suppose.
Okay, I'll bite.
Do you remember a few months ago when I asked you if you were happy?
You mean when you woke me up in the middle of the night? Yes.
Are we ready to order?
I think we'll need a minute.
Yes, sir.
So
you said you were happy, and that's fantastic. I meant what I said about the kids. We've done well with the boys, with Allegra. We both have great jobs, great friends.
33 years together brings a lot of ups and downs. But I guess, all things considered, we've done pretty well.
Do you ever feel like maybe we started too young? I mean, we've been together since high school. I guess I just want to know, did you mean what you said?
About being happy? Yes. Why? Daniel, you're starting to scare me. Is everything okay?
I think it will be. Sylvia, I'd like a divorce.
Every story worth reading begins with a good foreword. Ask anyone literate and they'll tell you that.
So here's ours. And if you don't agree with it, you can keep it to yourself.
Each of us has a private Austen. Maybe to you, her work is the pinnacle of romance. Or maybe some of you read her for her ironic prose. I happen to think she's a comic genius.
It's not like Shakespeare. His jokes make you laugh really just because he's Shakespeare, and you kind of owe him that.
Exactly.
But for those of you out there who are Jane Austen novices, never fear. Sometimes we just have to try something out in order to find what we like or don't like.
Anyway, I think we can all agree that it is essential to reintroduce Austen into our lives regularly. Let her look around and see what needs changing. Am I right?
So this first scene is really it was one of the hardest scenes to do for us technically, because bringing in this show, every time you see someone appear or disappear on stage, normally, when you do a stage show, that's simple. You can people just walk themselves on and off stage. But when you're calling a show like this, no one can move themselves or speak for themselves because the actors that are there on screen right now cannot see or hear what's happening in the background. So a lot of times I had to use cue cards. I'd write little notes out that said, like, sound effects or whatever, and I'm standing there by the screen holding up this thing to be like, hey, it's time for you to talk now, or it's time for you to leave the stage now, because Jackie can't walk herself off stage during this part of the show. And so that opening right there where we had 7 of the cast members all on screen at the same time was mind-blowing for Keely and I. It was like, all right, this person now, and this person now, and this person now. And it was just really crazy. So that was a difficult scene from a technical standpoint.
Yeah, I just felt like it was so long.
Gotcha.
But, I don't know.
Was that because Prudy felt like it was so long, or was that because Brittany felt like it was so long?
No, it just felt, like when I was watching the playback with my family, it just felt really long.
When you're in the heat of it, it goes by like so fast. Like, when I have my script open and I'm flipping from scene to scene, like, I'm there before I know it, and then it's like, oh crap, now's the next time to mute and unmute and do all those things. But agreed, like when you're just watching it and enjoying it, because you go to think, I didn't feel like it was that long. Is that going to be long enough? Like, are people going to enjoy that show? And is it going to be a show? And then you watch it and you're like, oh yeah, no, it is show length. It wasn't a 50-minute thing and they blinked and missed it.
Yeah, I really liked with this book club, I don't show up until the end, so I did my little piece for the prologue, and then I had time to go and grab my muffin. Probably could even have stuck it in the microwave, and then it would have been nice and warm to eat it. Never thought of that while we were doing it. I was too nervous, but that could have happened.
Zach, you were saying that you had made some of the muffins as part of the props for this. I know that Keely, our set designer, did a lot of the props stuff for it, but can you tell us a little bit about the props situation for the show and how that was different than doing it?
I can show you. I just have my props bin. I kept them all in. Still got a few. Got the sushi menu. Got this little number that everybody's going to love to see. They'll have the Starbucks cup. So I just kept them in there organized by scene, and then pulled them out when I needed them.
What was the thing in the package?
Oh.
Was that your Spider-Man costume?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
Don't give it away. Don't give
Gina
it away.
K's.
Yeah.
Man, this whole scene, I literally watched this back and I'm like, nobody's ever gonna like my character. Like, she's so bad at this first scene. But I don't know, I put a lot of work into trying to figure out where Pretty came from, because I just didn't want to leave people hating her. Like, I really didn't, because I don't hate her. Like, right here in the top of the scene, like, you can tell she's got some social anxiety so bad that her need to, prove herself to people is just so apparent in this opening scene, and I just, I wanted to give her a little bit of depth and make her someone relatable.
Did you guys get to read any of the comments from the opening night? Like the comments that cast, or that people watching left? There was this live tweet battle going on about Team Prudy and Team Allegra the whole time. And people in the first scene were like, oh, I don't like Prudy. Like, oh, no, I'm Team Allegra all the way. She's so funny. And then about halfway through, a bunch of them were like, Allegra's awful. Like, they were like, no.
Some people were saying, like, Allegra's made some really bad life decisions.
One guy in particular happened to say that at the worst possible time. Obviously, if you've seen the show, you know Allegra's story arc and you know where it's going. But, like, the scene where she tells the story about what happened to her as a kid, he had just messaged in and was like, Allegra's made some really awful life choices. And we're over here, like, aghast, because we're like, how could you say that about her? And then it gets to the end of the scene where she tells what happened to her, and he messages and he goes, I feel like a jerk now. I think one of the interesting things is props. Like Zach was showing you, everybody has props at their house. So, you know, when you think of props for a show, there's usually like a props table backstage where all of the props sit, and actors can go and grab them off of the prop table and use them. Well, here, it was like everybody had to have their own little prop table, essentially. And things like the matching cups and stuff like that had to be thought of ahead of time. And, you know, everybody had to have this specific teacup for this specific scene at their house and use it all at the same time. And there are certain moments, like at the very end, you'll see Gina Kay and the girl who plays Lisa, the woman who plays Lisa, and Eric, the guy who plays Trey, they hand props to each other. During that handoff, Gina Kay was in California, and Trey was here in Virginia. And so that handoff, it's so flawless. They practiced it so many times that it looks like he literally just hands it to her in the next screen. And we had to do a couple of moments like that. I think, Zach, you handed a coffee cup to somebody at one point, and none of the actors are in the same place. So watching them do this with the props was really, really cool, at least from my perspective. You guys did a really good job doing it.
Oh, look, this is Prudy being horrified
that
they're not sequels.
Oh, well, I went to the bookstore to buy copies of the novels, and I saw this. I had no idea they were all sequels, so I figured it might be a good idea to keep them all together, you know, in case I have to go back and reference something. You said we were starting with Emma, but that's in the middle, so I'm just wondering.
We're doing Emma today. Did you read it?
Yeah, but
They're not
is it like
sequels.
Oh, well, I guess we can just start anywhere then.
With Emma and Mr. Knightley, you just never feel the sex.
Still, I think Mr. Knightley may be my favorite of all the Austen men. He's the only one who seems desperately in love, like he needs it. He reminds me of my second husband, Marco. Such an earnest, well-meaning man. But that chemistry didn't work out, and neither does this one. No passion.
Sans passion, l'amour n'est rien. That is one of Jane's favorite themes.
Jane.
Yikes.
What we're meant to see is not so much the lack of passion, but the control of it. See how our admirable characters don't give in? That's what separates them from the minor characters.
Après moi, le déluge. But Prudy is right. It's all in the novels. Sense and sensibility, obviously. Oh, and Maria's infidelity in Mansfield Park.
I forgot about that. Glad I'm not doing that one.
But isn't the fact that physical attraction is so unpredictable one of the things we like most about it? The fact that love makes people crazy.
Yes.
But that does not excuse bad behavior.
But what are we calling bad? Something that is out of character or something that is against societal norm? Who gets to decide?
Allegra, whose side are you on here?
Now, hold on. I think we're all on the same side. We can all agree that Emma becomes decidedly less crazy after she marries Mr. Knightley, which means love in this book is an act of sanity, right?
Well, I'm really sorry to do this, but my car isn't very reliable and the fog is rising, so.
I need to go too.
Oh, but Jocelyn, I brought some books for you. Remember how I told you about Ursula Le Guin, the science fiction writer?
Yeah, you know, it isn't necessary to bring a host gift to these things.
Oh, well, yeah, but I figured you might like it.
Thanks, Greg.
Science fiction reader, I certainly hope we didn't scare him off. You think he'll come back next time?
I'd rather him than her. So we can't be above the author, but we can be her BFF? And seriously, what era was she born in?
If you want to check out the review, you can check me out at It's Zachalakin on Instagram.
Good job, Zach.
Proud of you.
Jane Austen lives on.
I actually did the same thing where, I had an extra 6 months, 9 months to work on the book, so I had actually read them all 6 of them, I finished them about 3 weeks before we did the live stream or so. So it was funny to me because I was reading, when I read the books and I was listening to what they're talking about during the book club, like in the scenes, and I was like, I was telling Dan this like outside of rehearsal. I was just like, it's kind of annoying because the stuff they talk about during the book club has like nothing to do with the main plot of the book most of the time. And he's like, yeah, that's why Pretty gets annoyed. And I was like, well, I understand because I'm annoyed.
This girl gets the award for most, I think probably most like method acting in this show.
I did not do a book review though, so Zachalakin does. He gets those.
Yes.
Yeah, I hope Brittany didn't do any method acting with the like falling in love with a 17-year-old.
Well,
listen.
It wouldn't be the first time that she's kissed a 17-year-old in a show. In a show.
Wow.
In a show.
That part. Wow.
Oh my gosh. People are gonna watch this, you know?
Hopefully they already saw you in Hairspray, and so they know what we're talking about, right?
I did do Hairspray 2 summers ago, and my co-star was 11 years my junior. And it was quite, I was like, where are your parents? Can I talk to them real quick before we
I'm really glad you said 11 years my junior, because when I heard 11 years, I went, whoa.
No.
And then you said my junior, and I was like,
Yeah, I played Tracy, and Link was significantly younger than I.
The funny thing was, when I asked her about doing this show, one of the first things she said was, in a very joking way, well, at least I won't have to kiss a teenager in this one. And I was like, oh, I haven't told you what role I wanted you for yet.
It's me on the screen.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Jackie, we got a lot of comments that you stole the show. Like, flat out, people were like, Jackie, or the woman who plays Pam, like, she's the star of the show.
Oh, well, thank you. And I also want to have it said, in real life, women fear me because they think I'm out to take their boyfriends. I'm not. As someone who's been cheated on, like, when I find out that somebody has a boyfriend, husband, whatever, that person is automatically unattractive to me. Like, I'm not interested in your man. Quite frankly, if your man is looking to other women, he's not that great. So, I just want to have it said, not interested in anybody's man.
We had a lot of
Here
people...
goes Allegra's car accident.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
That scene was really hard to do, too, because it was the quickest transition in the entire show. And we had to somehow make it look like an oncoming car, and Keely went back and forth trying to figure out, okay, do we use a sound effect to convey this? Do we use the lighting? And ultimately we settled on the lighting, but after doing that, we realized this has got to be like a split-second thing.
that was my split-second sound effect.
Speaking of split-second moments, I don't think it happens in this scene, but there are 2 moments in the show where I realized that someone spoke, and you could hear them like their mic was on, and they said something that was hysterically funny in the moment. And I think one of them's in the elevator scene, so I'll come back to that when we're in the elevator scene. But I die every time I listen to it. It's not a sound effect, and it was not intentional, but it's really funny.
Like, did someone flush a toilet in someone's house and then someone said something about it? Or
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And I die every time it happens. That one's not in the elevator. I forget when that happens, but it happens later on in the show. You hear the toilet flush in the background, and someone goes, "I'm recording right now, so be quiet," or something like that. It is the funniest thing. I cannot.
No, oh my god.
It's so funny.
Really sad that I missed that.
Maybe by the time we get to it tonight, I'll remember when it is, and we can pause for a second and listen to it. Talk about accidents. We had a moment in this scene where we had just told Brittany that night, hey, when we put you on screen in this scene, bear in mind, the actors can't see where they are on the screen. And they cannot hear their own, they can hear each other. That's all they can hear. They can't hear sound effects, anything. None of the music playing, none of it. So they rely completely on us to know where they are on the screen, what's going on. I'm using my cue cards. And Keely is at her computer, moving them back and forth. But we moved Brittany accidentally across the room during this scene. And as far as she knew, she was up in the corner watching the kids from across the classroom. And then we accidentally moved her into the middle of the classroom and didn't tell her. And halfway through, Keely's like, oh my gosh, she's not going to know where she is on the screen. And it actually worked out fine. But there is a scene later where you can tell that happens again. We moved Trey and Lisa in the middle of a scene, and they were looking completely opposite each other the entire scene. They're just looking like this.
I'll be honest with you, I really did not understand what you guys were talking about when you were talking about moving me, so I was like, I'm just going to generally look in a general direction, and it'll be fine.
Jackie, how do you feel about this scene? As Dr. Yep, how does this scene make you feel?
Not gonna lie, I'm a little jealous. But I feel that Olivia, the actress who played Corinne, did an amazing job. Because I haven't seen her in an actor capacity a whole ton. She's usually behind the scenes. But to see her give this amazing, subtle, nuanced performance as Corinne brought me to my knees. It was gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah, Olivia's worked with me backstage on 3 different projects now, and I've never gotten to put her on stage for anything. And I knew right away in this project I wanted her to be able to act. It's just been such a long... She is.
And she does really well on film, too.
I think one of the things that I enjoy most about working with actors, obviously, if somebody has talent for acting, you can tell. What a lot of people don't get to see is how actors are behind the scenes. Just because someone is super talented doesn't mean they're always easy to work with. And Olivia's got it in spades. I love working with her. I mean, she does anything that she's asked. She thinks outside the box. She comes up with new solutions to problems. She's great.
Just don't give her too much coffee.
Okay, now that we're all looking at Prudy and Dean's house, it was a point of conversation of, if Prudy's a teacher, then what is Dean doing that this is their house, and they also live in Southern California?
Yep.
How much money must he make?
He has accounts in Seattle, which you're about to hear.
That's why I'm saying it's good that we will be in France.
Oh, wait. I meant to tell you I can't go.
What?
My boss needs me to handle some business accounts in Seattle, and I have to go next month.
But Dean, we've had these tickets forever. You said we would finally get a honeymoon, and what will my students think? Going to France is the only way to perfect my accent. Anyone who speaks the language will tell you that.
Babe, it's fine. We can go next month.
I love this scene. I think this scene is really, like I said, aesthetically pleasing, but also you start to see why, Prudy's not so nice. Not that she's not so nice, but why she's got some issues with her marital life. You know what I mean? It's not 100% her fault.
As is usually the case, I feel like a lot of times it depends on, when someone's having marital issues, you hear one side of the story. and it's very easy to like take that as gospel, especially if it's your friend telling you. I think one of the things that I really like about this story is that it presents both sides. You know, you could very feasibly watch this once and see it all from Prudy's perspective, and watch it again and see it from Dean's perspective, I think. And neither of them are perfect. It reminds me, in a way, a little bit of like last 5 years. I was talking about that with someone today, and they were like, I love Kathy in last 5 years. And I was like, what makes her so much more enjoyable than whatever his name is, the husband? And they were like, I don't know, I just like her better, but I also know that like she's also at fault for what happens. So,
I love her losing it at him about the dress.
The way that Adam played Dean, because a character like Dean, it's really easy to play him as a one-note jerk, or on the flip side, the Hallmark hero.
Yeah, like wounded. It's all her fault.
Yeah, but he made Dean a real person for me, because in the book and in the film, I felt that his character wasn't really that developed. So, the mixture of your writing plus Adam's acting, magic, absolute magic.
Alright, I'm not going to talk through this whole scene, but what we're about to watch, you should just occasionally glance at Prudy and watch the shade she gives.
Oh, absolutely.
I won't say anything else.
Also, notice the fact that nobody ever takes a sip from their teacup by themselves. There's always at least one other person doing it. And it drove me crazy, because I'd always be like mid-sip and see somebody else on the screen doing it too.
You know what my favorite thing about this was? Aside from my shade and the tea synchronization, watch every time Zach looks somewhere.
Oh no, stop. See, when we first blocked this, everyone was sitting in a semicircle. So when we did it on screen, obviously we couldn't fit them in a semicircle. So unfortunately, it ended up being in kind of like an actual circle. So it's the suggestion that they're all sitting on the same plane, but obviously they're not. So when Zach looks back and forth, he's trying to look at the people sitting on opposite sides of him. Unfortunately, the way the screen looks like he's just looking at the ceiling.
There he goes. Yes. There he goes again.
The shade in this scene is what made it.
Fun little tidbit, something that a realization I think I'm coming to after the play, is that at one point, I think it's, I forget who it is, but somebody puts Greg on the spot. I think it might be Jocelyn. She's like, are you going to agree with Allegra? Is it a fairy tale thing?
Yes.
And Greg says something about there being a stunning visual opening with the snowfall. And in the book, there's no such thing. And I haven't seen the 1995 movie with Emma Thompson, but my guess is that that's how it starts. So now I'm wondering, did Greg maybe not actually read this one? And he just watched the movie.
Watched the film. Or did the author maybe not read this one and just watch the film? That sounds like a question for Karen Joy Fowler.
Karen Joy Fowler, if you're watching this, I apologize. I did not mean to expose you like that.
Karen Joy Fowler, I also apologize for what I said earlier about the development of the character of Dean.
Oh.
Love your book.
There's 3 people taking a sip of tea right now at the same time. That I just happened to glance up and 3 people are drinking tea.
And now you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
No, I think any good author would tell you, though, that their work is not perfect. And one of the things that they love about it is being able to go back and pick out things that they would have done differently. And then when if they continue on in their career and write more, they learn to do things differently as they go on. And she's won so many awards for her books. I don't remember where Jane Austen falls in the order of the books that she wrote. but I'm sure it was not the last thing she won an award for. And she had so many good things to say about this adaptation, and she just loved it. And yeah, Karen Joy, if you're watching this, thank you so much again. I cannot say thank you enough for trusting us with your material.
I think that this is another instance where Jane is employing irony. I am often ironic myself. Sometimes my friends have to ask me, was that a joke?
Was that a joke?
Austen's minor characters are pretty
Even that look right there. That look right there between Rudy and Allegra.
All of the side stories that she weaves together.
So I say something, and then Zach goes, was that a joke? Looking the wrong direction. Allegra laughs, and then I glare at her.
And the shade. Just being able to communicate the anger and the shade during these moments. I love it. It's so much harder to do on screen. You have literally no one next to you to look at, no references. Canberra, the lady who plays Jocelyn, was telling me, she said, I set up something on a coat rack across from where I was sitting, so I had a point of reference to look at, because there's no one else there. So she said, when I was talking, I was looking at this coat rack to know where I would be looking if I was talking to a person.
Every time I looked sharply to the right, I was looking at the lamp in Dan's bedroom, which is where I filmed this.
Fun fact about Canberra, who played Jocelyn, this was her theater debut. Like her first time acting ever.
Never been on screen, never been on stage. And you know, I've already told her this, so she knows this, it's not a secret. I almost did not cast her. And I will tell you why.
She's a performer, she's a musician. And so she has her own business, performing down at the ocean front, like a lot of us do. And, so she's done she's good at being on stage and, like, working a crowd. But this was a completely, like, night and day. And, like, one of the rehearsals, she called it the playbook.
Oh.
And nobody knew what she was talking about. And I was like, it's a script. She was like, oh, shoot, script!
Yes.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
You almost didn't cast her because of that? What the heck, Dan?
No. We were out to drinks one night. This was months and months before I had even finished writing the script. And I was mentioning to Brittany how I wanted her for one of the roles. And Canberra looked at us and she goes, theater sounds so fun. I would just love to do theater sometime. Like, it just sounds like a lot of fun. And I was like, oh, yeah. Like, have you ever done theater before? And she was like, no, it just sounds like a lot of fun. And, me and my pretentious theater brain, I'm over here going, that just sounds like somebody who, like, wants to just, play around and wouldn't take this seriously. And so then later we were looking for an actress to play Jocelyn. And Brittany said, well, what about Canberra? And I was like, I don't know. She's never done this. She's such a pivotal character. I don't know. And so I almost didn't cast her, but it was one of the best decisions that we made. Such a happy accident.
Ooh, Zach, talk about this scene.
Right.
Yeah, so we didn't know how we were gonna do it, but a couple revolutions of iPhone ago, they came up with this like screen recording thing. So I think Bree, who played Bianca, is still saved in my phone as Bianca Harris, and she and I texted the entire conversation back and forth while my screen was recording. But fun fact, the actual recording is 10 minutes long, which would have been way too long for this scene. So Dan went in and worked some magic and sped it up.
I didn't know that.
But if you're like me and you want everything to be logical, you may be wondering why Greg would have a red recording light up at the top of his phone, and also why, if he's at home, he's on LTE and not Wi-Fi. And another little Easter egg factoid, the phone that I'm using on screen right now is actually an old phone, because I was very afraid that I would have friends watching the live stream, that I'd be trying to like act like I'm texting my sister, and then they'd text me and be like, do you see my message? Those are just the kind of friends I have.
I'm pretty sure I would have done that.
Yeah. Brittany, I'm pretty sure you did do that. Like, so several times in this process.
Stop it! Bad guys, bad.
You don't need to expose me like that. Listen.
Oh, Sam.
Well, you exposed me every time you made my R2D2 text tone go off.
No, I think that was very in character, actually. If that had gone off, I think people would have been like, oh, okay.
Oh, here's Brigadoon, where I play a high school student.
Fun fact, most of the cast in Jane Austen was originally in the cast of a local university's Brigadoon. And Brigadoon got shut down because of COVID, which allowed a lot of these cast members to be in this show. And so when we got to this scene and we read it the first time, I don't know how many looks I got across the table of like, oh, are you throwing shade at Brigadoon? And I said, no, it was in the movie and it was in the book. Karen Joy Fowler picked that show and that's what they did. And so that's what I kept. And it was just a really funny coincidence.
Jinx. Oh, so here if you look at the pantomime between me and Adam, we're talking about tea and vocal problems. And the funny thing was, when we were doing auditions and callbacks for Brigadoon last fall, like nearly all of the people who auditioned lost their voice. So that conversation was more real than I imagined it would be. And it was pantomimed.
Go on, work on it.
But my lass, you haven't even heard it yet though.
Can you just go?
The kid who plays Trey, his name is Eric. And I mentioned that I had done Hairspray a couple of summers ago, and he was in the ensemble for that show. Man, that kid, he's just like, he's so talented. He is really talented, and he's a warm-hearted person. Like, he's a very caring kid. It was like hard to see him be a jerk. I was like, please don't ever turn into this. Aww.
He made me laugh. He had some of the funniest moments, I think, during rehearsals. Just always such a good attitude. One of the things that I love about this scene was originally when we had everybody on screen, when we had decided we were going to keep the ensemble for this scene, I said, all right, you guys are just going to have to ad-lib the beginning of this scene, which was a nightmare for Connor. Thank you, Connor, for still allowing us to make this work. But it was like 5 people on screen at the same time talking over each other, just to create background noise. And every night we would stop it at the most awkward moment where Trey was saying something about sex, selling drugs, something. I was like, we can't be putting this on screen. We cannot allow you to ad-lib this, so we're going to be... He was just being crazy, but it was really funny. He regularly would have me in stitches during rehearsals. Him and Olivia, the two of them together, I just couldn't keep it together.
Gina K is she's so good.
Yes.
This was one of those scenes that I had a hard time trying to figure out why in the Sam heck would Prudy start telling some of these stories that she tells to Lisa, and I was like, why would you? And I really had to like dig deep, and then we kind of came to the conclusion that she doesn't really. Dean's not listening to her. You know what I mean? Like, he probably knows some of this stuff, but like Gina K's going through now what Prudy went through 10 years ago. So, she's like, I'm trying to relate. Well, I don't really know how to relate,
No.
And Lisa's like, please stop. Please stop doing this.
As a high school teacher, I can verify this does in fact happen.
Sometimes that's, especially when you see a child struggling, like, sometimes you just have to try whatever you can to get through to them. I've also been a teacher, too, and I've worked in some school systems where it's pretty bleak. And this scene I wrote from partial personal experience, just the fear of not being able to connect with someone that you see struggling. But as a teacher, you also have a lot of restrictions on what you can and can't say, and lines you can't cross with students, even if you see them hurt or struggling.
When I turned 12, I started pretending that my mother died of cholera. It's crazy. One day I actually said it out loud to her, though, and even though she was still around in the flesh, our relationship definitely changed after that.
Well, my situation isn't pretend. I didn't get a choice.
You're right. I'm sorry.
Lisa's kind of an amalgamation of a couple of different characters in the book, and what you see in the book in flashes is Prudy's backstory. What Dan did was he created this character of Lisa to basically give you Prudy's backstory, but in the present day with a character that we currently care about. And so I think you really did breathe life into a character that, like, she becomes, like, this character that we ache for the most. Like, even more than Sylvia. You ache for Lisa a lot, I think. And you also, in doing that, you gave us a way to ache a little bit for Prudy, too.
Regardless of how selfish Prudy can seem when she's fighting for herself, it shows that at the core of it, it's about helping other people. Like, she really does. She has a maternal side, and she cares about what happens to the people around her. And I think that's why people, in the end, really do identify with Prudy. So many people didn't like her in the beginning, and by the end of the show, she's their favorite character.
See the elevator to your left?
Yes.
See the staircase to your right?
Okay.
Pick one.
This scene. Can we talk?
Concierge.
Can we talk about this?
I love this.
Can I say, Olivia and I, the day before we opened, she came over and sat down with me, and we rewrote this whole scene the night before we opened. Originally, the concierge had different lines. It was a lot shorter, and we added in a bunch of stuff. And when I was writing it, I envisioned something more like Bon Qui or Sassy Gay Friend, is what I was thinking. Olivia got on screen that day and read it the first time, straight-faced, Wednesday Addams, and it was glorious. It worked so well. I was in stitches.
Thanks.
And then here we are, the appearance of my favorite character in the show.
During the whole Prudy Lisa scene, I was always in the next room over putting on this costume, but then it was difficult because it actually had gloves, so I lost the ability to really, like, use my fingers. So it was always this, like, am I going to make it, am I not, kind of thing.
Oh, I forgot Tom Holland was in this.
Jocelyn?
Greg. Wow. You're here.
I love my job.
This is why he's my favorite. This is why this person is my favorite character in the show. Because
Tom Holland?
Yeah, I love Tom Holland. He's my favorite.
Same.
This was really good, the way you guys looked at each other, like,
yes.
Up and down, like, you guys really look like you're making eye contact. It was cool.
Zach and Canberra. Bro.
What was that? Zach looked in the right place and it worked really well.
Wait, I'm pretty sure Jackie's on screen right now.
This is one of the few moments where Jackie's not playing the other woman.
Exactly.
Zach and Canberra win the awards for sure for making this. Like, you guys just worked so well to make it look like you were the same. I think probably more than anybody else.
Well, I actually went through and took screenshots from an earlier rehearsal so that I always had, like, a picture in front of me of where everybody was in the scene. And one night before we started, I sent all of these to Canberra. So that she also had them to kind of, like, look through, and that's our secret.
Look at that.
It's brilliant.
Slavsky was talking about Zach when he wrote An Actor Prepares.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, I will say, I asked Zach and Canberra to do some very weird things during the rehearsal process for this show.
Dan, you make that sound really bad.
Okay, well, okay.
Oh, tell us more details.
Let me clarify.
Does this come in book form, too?
Before we had designed backgrounds, a la Keeley Heil, one night we were talking about how we were going to have to do backgrounds for the show, and I asked Zach and Canberra, hey, could you guys take your computers or whatever it is that we're recording on and go out to your cars and sit in your cars in the driveway and do this entire scene in your cars. And not even missing a beat. They both were like, sure, that sounds great. And they just like went out into their cars and did this entire scene out in their driveways. You know, neighbors probably thought they had lost their minds. I'm pretty sure Canberra's husband thought she lost her mind. But, you know, they did it. And
at one point, Canberra's husband came out and was like, don't kill the car battery.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Thank you for keeping us on task, Dave. But yeah, it was great. The willingness to play and to try things made working with you guys such a wonderful experience. And in a situation like this, where we're doing something that has never been done before, I think being willing to be flexible like that is so important.
Really? You dated Daniel?
Why are you surprised? Because I'm older than I look?
I know, right?
Because
Oh my God.
you had dated anyone.
There it was. Did you hear it? That was Gina K's microphone not being turned off and her accidentally speaking in the middle of their scene, which was really funny because what she said sounded like she was replying to Canberra about her looking really young.
How she's doing. I mean, everyone can use some encouragement. Oh, this is me.
Okay. See you at book club.
Or upstairs?
Or upstairs. What a bunch of freaks! No offense if any invisible people are still in here.
Dad, are you here?
Oh, Lisa, here, come here. Look at those guys trying to teach me how to make dinner with chopsticks.
Dad, you left the stove on. Didn't you hear the alarm? You could have burned the whole house down.
Yeah, I was making dinner. Why are you so angry?
I'm not angry. I'm just worried because I can't leave you alone at all anymore.
Well, I'm fine.
So this is a scene that really established Lisa as a character, and as was said before, Lisa was an original character made up of a bunch of different characters from the books. There was a girl named Karen that was in the play with Trey, and then Lisa Straight is actually the first girl that he dates in the book. And then, of course, we used it as a way to tell Prudy's backstory as well. And I also didn't feel like there was any character in the book or the movie that accurately portrayed the darkness of Mansfield Park in a way that I really wanted it to come across. And we did have a lot of feedback that Lisa's character might have been a little too dark for the storyline of this show in particular, but I tried to keep people's storylines kind of together. So if, for instance, Allegra's storyline I made a little bit darker in order to keep Jocelyn's storyline less dark, and vice versa with Prudy and Lisa.
Oh gosh, Lisa, I've been so worried.
I'm so sorry to bother you. I didn't know where else to go. It's my dad. He's never been like this before. He was so far gone tonight.
Shh, it's okay. Come in. Are you all right? Did he hurt you?
No, I'm fine. I promise. He isn't usually this bad. I couldn't stay there right now. Can I maybe stay with you for a few days?
Well, yes, of course. Dean and I have room.
Thank you.
I did want to say, too, that we're all advocates here of if you're experiencing some kind of family problem, family violence, anything like that, we want you to be able to speak out about it. And if that means contacting somebody here, definitely. Please do that.
Character for your dad, I believe you. But if you are going to protect yourself, at some point, Lisa needs to be honest with Lisa about the situation. I went through the same thing when I was younger, and no one can help until the problem's identified.
Now, hold on. Don't get ahead of me. In college, I was part of a dancing group called the Red Hot Peppers. I know, it's hard to imagine me as a dancer. But I did it to make money on the side during the flamenco craze. I'm not entirely sure if that was real or just something that our manager invented. But while on tour, we stopped in a little town called Clear Lake.
I just want to take a second to brag on Naoka here. because just as a reminder, any of these scenes that have music in them may have looked really easy to do, but she had to set up the timing of all of these herself. The reason that these scenes with her flashbacks have music in the background is because when we do the show in person, live on stage, these are all dance sequences, and we have a wonderful choreographer who's putting together dances for these scenes to make it more kind of like a dream ballet type thing. Well, we didn't really know how to translate that onto the screen. It was kind of impossible to have people dancing across the screens. So Keely and Nyoka set up timing blocks, and Nyoka gets the award for this because she kind of had this genius idea of timing out each of her paragraphs to the music and then writing down the timing of it on the side of her computer screen and using a stopwatch. So during each one of these scenes, she knows, oh, I have 20 seconds to say these 2 lines, and then we have to move on to the next part, because she can't hear this music as it's playing at all. And she hit her cues night after night after night, and I was floored. So she has some of these really technically difficult scenes, her and Remy, and they just pulled it off so well.
And there it was. Number 3 on the list. His mother held slots 1 and 2. I made my first appearance on it a few years after we were married. I started to catch on, but not fast enough. John ran off with my little sister without even divorcing me. I learned he had quite a past. Gambling debts and a arrest record. But from the whole experience, I learned something much more.
Particularly because we brought her into this process so late in the game. Like, she came in to cover for another actress. What, like a week, 2 weeks before we opened?
That's just it. I don't want to fight at all. I just want this all to end.
Kudos for that.
My dearest, most beloved Sylvia, we haven't come to the end yet.
I had a beautifully long time after that pajama sequence to get into my next costume for Act 2.
Did you guys have a lot of quick changes during the show?
I just had the one. I had a low-cut dress on with a red sweater, and then, so that scene ended when I was in my house with Dean. That's why you see me, like, furiously taking that sweater off, because after, when that scene ends, I had, 12 seconds, 15 seconds to, like, get into my next costume, which was, like, a kind of high-necked shirt that Trey apparently says looks like a flight attendant, so I had like flight attendant outfit to put on after that. So
that was one of my favorite. That was one of the lines that got like probably one of the biggest gasps. Was when he says, "Oh, no dress today." I also like it when you dress like a flight attendant. People are like, "Oh, we do not speak to our teachers that way, sir."
Okay, I see the intermission screen. It's buffering a little bit.
Alright, so our bit climbing back, which means we're back on, and we're here for the second half of the show.
While we fight through all of our technical issues, I just wanted to give a shout out to Stuart Kasnow over at Pandemic Players in Maryland. He's the one who helped us with all of our technical stuff. He took time to teach Keely and I how to do all this backstage stuff. We're using a program called OBS to do all of this, which is actually meant for online gaming and streaming for things like Twitch. Essentially, it's like, say one day we woke up and no one's televisions were working and no one could figure out how to watch TV anymore, so someone was like, I have a radio. Let me turn this radio into a television. That's basically what Stuart and his team did, and I think it's pretty genius. And they should definitely be getting recognition for all of the time they took to train us to do this and all of the the expertise it took to even think up this idea. It allows you to create your own backgrounds. Pandemic players, they do shows every week, pretty much, and so they have to come up with new backgrounds and new sets every week. Stuart photoshops all of his own stuff, which is phenomenal. I cannot believe that he gets all of this done in a week. And he runs the regular, sound and stage calls and that sort of thing. Really, the only thing you don't have to run on OBS like you would on a stage in person is lighting. But you have the extra things of having to call the crew and cast members on and off stage all the time. You have to have someone set up with buttons to push for sound. Keeley had 2 computers running. I had 2 computers and an iPad running, and Connor had his computer and his phone running to contact the actors and tell them when they were on deck, as it were. So, and then of course we had 2 Zoom rooms running at the same time. We're running OBS, Zoom, a program called QLab that runs our sound, and it was just a lot. It was a lot to learn in a week, and a lot to learn in 2 weeks, and a lot to put together. So, but this is a whole new way of pioneering theater, and I'm really excited to be on the cusp of this sort of thing. And I know if Keely were here, she would say the same thing.
Lisa, welcome to the club. I think Pretty would be very proud of your conclusions.
Proud? Really? You're proud? Of what, Dean?
I was just saying how proud I am of the way you handled yourself tonight.
What? Sorry about the delay. We're back. We
She stood there judging me the whole time. My eyes could have seen that.
The coffee shop.
I'm sorry.
Book
I
club.
would never do that. I'm just sorry if you felt like I wasn't supportive.
The night of the actual show, I accidentally started too early
Nothing I
because I
do
forgot
seems
what
good enough.
Dan's cards meant.
That's right. You know what my mother said to me the first time
So
she
I
met
had to
you?
every night hold up
She said,
a sign
you
that
can
said,
marry someone you're
start
lucky
scene.
to get, or you can marry
And
someone
then
who's
if the
lucky
scene
to get
started
you.
and people were not
She
on
made it pretty
stage,
clear which is
or they
which
were
in
on
this
stage
case.
and didn't have lines, I had to hold up the second
Since
cue
when do
card
you listen to
that said,
anything that she had said? Why
Zach,
can't we
go,
both be lucky?
or whoever.
Because that is not reality.
And so I held up the start scene
Reality is
card,
that
and
when I
Zach
look at
thought
you,
that meant start
we are still in
talking.
high school. And I am that band
on
geek
screen
that all
what
the
was
girls
happening
hate,
was there's a
and you are the
transition with
jock that all the girls love, and the only time that I don't have to
So you
compete
turn Zach
your
around and
attention
goes, "Hello,
is when
hello.
we meet up at your house to
I'm
watch
sorry
the
that
OC.
Baby, high school is over.
For some of us, Dean, high school is never over.
And then the scene started and he goes, hello, hello. I'm sorry that I'm late.
You know, Prudy, there was a time when I thought we were really happy. But we won't ever be able to get there until you settle this with yourself.
So the scene that we're currently in is one of the biggest fight scenes in the show.
One of
the things that really impressed me about this scene was that Prudy's eyelashes stayed on the whole time. Despite all the crying and the...
Hi.
Hey.
and everything else.
What are you doing here?
It was really good.
I'm house sitting.
Yeah, there was an actors group chat where people kept sending memes about Brittany's eyelashes.
You in French class today?
Yeah, I figured since we had a son, it would be a good chance to ditch.
So
I did cry,
doing
and they
here?
stayed on, so I'll
don't
give them
think
props.
Mrs. B runs detention at her house.
My eyelashes
Funny.
also stayed on while
I talked to her about the other day, and
Not
she said she
because
was
it was
having
bad,
trouble
because it was very
with a virus on her computer. I promised I'd come and fix
It's
it
our
for her.
favorite.
Her mom.
I said that one. That was mine. That's how I felt.
Seems weird. She
Particularly relevant during the last scene.
Well, so a note. Dan's room
Probably
is
around
like
the same time you started
sauna,
using her first.
so he had this fan in the
Well, I can
corner
get her
of his
laptop
room,
from
so
the other room,
I wasn't on
but if it has a
screen,
password, I don't
would turn
know
the
it.
fan on, and it would literally be like,
I do have the Netflix password though. You can stay for a bit. And
I just kind of expected them to be like little caterpillars, like blowing in the wind.
I don't know. I feel weird messing around in
the
Miss B's house.
performance that night, and her lashes were
missus.
legitimately like
And why?
He
Because
picked
she's
it
our
out
teacher, or
of the
because it's
hair
her
off
house.
of her face.
You want to run lines or something? You haven't been at the last 2 rehearsals.
Yeah, actually, I'm dropping out of the show.
What? You can't do that. We're 2 weeks from opening.
So this was the scene I was referring to earlier. If you'll notice, they start out facing each other, Lisa and Trey, when Trey comes in the door, and then halfway through the scene, we moved him across the room, and apparently the actors hadn't watched the video all the way through from the rehearsal the night before, and didn't realize that Trey was being moved across the room, and so they're facing opposite each other for most of this fight scene, which kind of undermined it a little bit, but the acting is stellar, phenomenal. Gina Kay and Eric both rocked it, and for what I mean, it didn't drop the energy at all, I don't think, but it was just one of those funny little blips that when you look back at it, you're like, oh man, no, why are they looking, why aren't they looking at each other? And yeah, that's why.
I'm not dumb either. You keep getting cast in these plays, but you're not as good of an actress as you think.
Hey, cutie, what's cooking?
So this is in what section? This is probably section 4.
You know, they don't have the energy for that. You never called us.
The way that I sectioned the script for this was a lot like a novel. Instead of having like a 2-act structure, essentially the script has 7, doesn't it? Is it 7 books? No, 7 characters, but 6 books.
Prologue.
Right.
And 6 acts.
Zach, I don't know how many people commented on how nice your bathroom was. So many people commented on how nice your bathroom was in the scene that you do with Bree.
Because of Kitty's background, yeah.
Yes. But they were like, oh, his bathroom's really nice. And we're like, you do know this isn't really his bathroom, right? This isn't really their houses.
Greg's a classy guy. He likes having the best.
I have questions about where the sister is, because it kind of looks like it could be a church pew. It kind of looks like it could be LTN. It kind of looks like it could be, I don't know, a bar.
It's supposed to be her kitchen at night. It has it's like a big wooden table, and she has a big bay window behind her. I think it's the brick wall that makes it confusing.
I mean, I like to go to bars and fold my laundry. I don't know about you guys.
I also want to say that Bree did a wonderful job playing the 3 sisters. We went back and forth on this character about combining it into one sister like they do in the movie. And I really didn't like the idea because his sisters are so different in the book.
She really did give each of them a different flavor.
She did. And Bree also understudied / read for almost every one of the other women in the show at some point. Bree and Olivia both. We would just pop on and be like, hey, so-and-so can't make it tonight, or this is what's going on with this. Could you read for this person? And they did it pretty much flawlessly every night.
Would it help if I told you some more stories?
I guess.
Come here. I missed you today.
This is a scene that I think was hard to do on camera for Bethany, because not having the closeness of having someone there and being able to, when we rehearsed this in person, she and Corinne, there was a lot of sitting together, sitting on the lap, sitting on the floor, holding the arms, and not having somebody there to do that with during this scene. I was really impressed with the way that she pulled it off and was able to emote still talking to
I felt
no one.
so guilty that I couldn't even have a good time with Steven. We drove to the country club where the dance was being held, and it was beautiful. It had this nice pool and an outdoor gazebo. About halfway through the evening, I was out on the floor with Steven, trying to dance. and I saw Mike outside on the porch watching us. I left Steven to go talk to Mike. He asked me not to go, but I went anyway.
God, yeah, I got chills. Like, no one could have played all those sides of Allegra the way that Bethany did.
Getting a great view of those rubber band balls in the center of the dining room.
There were so many of these backgrounds that had to be modified or photoshopped in some way. Prudy's house, for instance, once we got it, Keely finally found a background that would work, that had the space that we needed to put the characters on it, and also, like, looked appropriate for what the characters would use, and also was free because that was important. And then was like, oh, this scene takes place in the middle of the night. And it's definitely bright as day outside. So she'd have to go in and modify things like that. Like, she photoshopped the entire outside scene.
I just wasn't sure if
Jocelyn would approve. Probably not. But it's fine. She and I are definitely our own people, particularly where our taste in cuisine is concerned.
And what about your taste in men?
That is surprisingly similar.
Here we go. All right. So we're in the sushi restaurant. So this is with Sylvia and Daniel. I will say when...
Sylvia and
Greg, right. We got a lot of comments, first of all, that this was one of people's favorite scenes. They really loved... They said you guys did a really good job of playing the awkwardness up. And what I thought was really funny was when Keely showed me this picture, I was like, I had not envisioned this as an outdoor restaurant, but there's a moment where Daniel interrupts this date, and doing it on screen is really hard to do without having him literally walk past the table. And when I saw this picture, I was like, I have this evil idea. I really want us to tell Daniel to dump a bucket of water on his head and just pop up out of the pool. And then just go back down in. But I don't know that Miguel would have been too thrilled. I would have said, Miguel, can I have you dump a bucket of water on your head for this scene? He would have been like, I'm out.
And there's a sushi menu.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah, I grabbed this because I had this whole thing worked out that involved calling a sushi restaurant near my house, asking if I could borrow one of their menus since they don't have people coming in to sit down and order anymore. And the person on the other side of the phone totally did not understand what I was asking. So I ended up buying $15 worth of sushi for lunch that day for no reason. But then I just Googled printable sushi menu. And then a friend of mine who's a math teacher has these like plastic sleeves so that she can put a worksheet or whatever in it and can work on it with the dry erase marker and then erase it when they're done. So she actually, when I asked her, she said, oh, my husband and I go on a drive every morning. That's how we get out of the house. And she came over and dropped them off for me at my house.
So nice.
Yeah.
Zach, on the day of the show, speaking of props, I just want to show everyone this. I think I took a screenshot of it, but the evening before the show, Brittany and I went on we embarked across Hampton Roads to drop off all of the props for everyone that they were going to need for the show. And I took a screenshot of the map of what we did that day. I don't think we maxed out the amount of stops that you can make on Google Maps. I didn't know that that was possible. But we did it. And then, but my favorite part of that day was Zach coming over and dropping off muffins right before the show started. It was adorable. I wasn't expecting it.
So you think Austen meant her to be gay?
Maybe. Or maybe she's gay and even Austen didn't know it.
Kind of like that idea.
Remember Eric was like, can I have a muffin?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone
Do you want to get one?
Everyone who didn't get muffins wanted a muffin.
I mean, were they really missing out on much? They were 89-cent Just Add Milk makes 5 muffins.
You shouldn't reveal your secret like that.
They're
Hey,
pretty
there
good.
there might be a budding props master out there.
It only made 5 muffins?
For the little package. I think I ended up using 2 of the packages in kind of smaller muffin cups, and it made 12.
Oh.
So each of us who were eating them had 4 that I was making them for. Because Canberra made her own, Nyoka was in Western Virginia, and Brittany had her own.
Well, I didn't find a screenshot of us dropping off the props, but I did find this gem. This was one of my. It's my favorite. It's basically an autographed picture of my favorite character. This is when things got really complicated technically because we start. This is when we start.
No, not yet. It's here, and then it goes a couple different places.
Well, I mean, part 5 completely.
Oh.
Like, this is when we start jumping through scenes like that. It's like there's like a 5-minute scene, and then it's a whole new background, all new characters, different location. Then we hop to the next place in 5 minutes. No more short scenes with lots of people on screen at the same time and long pauses. That all goes out the window in part 5.
It's Lloyd! I love Lloyd!
Lloyd is my favorite character in the entire show.
I love Lloyd, first of all.
He's a beautiful being and should be protected.
He is a beautiful being.
Except he jumps off a cliff. Well, we think.
She warned him.
That's true.
Fun fact, so you know how he calls Bernadette Nettie? So Beth Winery is having her baby next month, and she's naming her baby Antoinette Marie. I already started calling the baby Nettie, and now she started calling the baby Nettie, and I'm like, I've done it, and she's not even born yet.
Yes, Jackie.
Yes.
It really is the cutest name.
It really is.
Don't you just love that?
For reference for the people watching, do you guys know who each of Bernadette's husbands are supposed to be? Because obviously, she's from Pride and Prejudice.
Lloyd is Reverend Collins.
Wait. Did he actually jump off of a
100%
cliff?
Reverend Collins.
I wish Reverend Collins would have jumped off a cliff, but he didn't, unfortunately.
The Lisa and Mr. Straight storyline is actually my favorite in the entire show. It really breaks my heart.
That storyline ends the way every kid wishes, every kid wishes that their parents would say something or do something like what Mr. Straight says to Lisa,
And I want to give a shout out to Remy too. Remy did such a good job with Mr. Straight. He came in and played a character that was not in his age range at all, and absolutely rocked it. Remy was actually the person who gave me the idea to do moving backgrounds in the first place. We had a rehearsal, the first Zoom rehearsal that we had for the show, when after everything got down because of COVID, and we had to move everything online. My first rehearsal was a rehearsal with Remy and Gina K. And I was like, scared to death. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. How do I lead a rehearsal online? Like, what do we even do here? And Remy just hopped right in and was like, hey, what if I stood in the doorway for this one? Hey, what if I laid in my bed for this one? Hey, what if I did this? And it really, it got Gina K really into it. She started moving around her house, the scene where she's in the kitchen. She, moved to the kitchen and did it in the kitchen. And that's really what kind of got the wheels turning for me. And I'm really, really thankful that I had those two in that rehearsal. Because it really it could have made or broken this process.
I did love the scene in the car.
The scene in the car with Jocelyn and Greg is my favorite scene. The two, well, it's technically 2 scenes split up, but it's one big moment. It's my favorite. That was
I liked that one too.
That was the moment that got my roommates to watch the show, because there was one night when you guys were rehearsing, and you remember I came downstairs, Zach, and I was like, hey, do you guys have a minute? You want to watch? I have them on screen.
So husbands. Who else is there? There's
John Andretti.
Well, there's Mr. Darcy, so he's got to be Senor Obando.
Senor Obando is Mr. Darcy,
right? And then George Wickham, which was my part when we did Pride and Prejudice in high school.
You played a Wickham?
John Andretti, or was he
the one that ran away with your sister? Yeah.
He was the politician with the silver tongue.
Yes.
Which leaves Mo Bellington.
So Mo, the only other guy I can think of from that book is Bingley.
That's it. Mo is Bingley because he becomes like her good friend, and he introduces her to Senor Obando, who ends up being Mr. Darcy.
Gotcha.
And there he was, sitting at my table, saying things like,
What a lovely event this is.
And...
Isn't the food delicious?
And...
Oh, smell those flowers.
So deep.
So, actually, Mo is another one of those characters who I made kind of an amalgamation. She references in the book that she has several husbands that we never really get to hear a lot about. In fact, Mo Bellington is a side character that sits at their table during Library Gala. He's not important to the plot at all. But she actually, Bernadette, ends up sitting there telling him about her husbands. Because all the other characters are busy running off with their drama.
Oh, Lord, there goes Adam. Look.
So,
Exited himself like he wasn't supposed to.
Here's the moment.
This is Prudy like, I'm gonna just drink this champagne.
So, in order to make sure that they weren't seen while they were changing or anything like that, everybody had a little cap that they could cover their screens with like this. We have to keep everyone's Zoom window open during the entire show. Well, one of the things we said was like, make sure you don't cover your screen before we take you off stage, which still happened a couple of times. It's the one of the fallbacks of having to do live theater this way.
Mo Bellington is one of my favorite characters in the book. Like, how that chapter ended cracked me up.
Yes, he is. He's definitely a character. Some of the things that he says, I really like his witty
Smell these flowers.
No, the things that he says in this version are nothing like what he says in the book. Which of Bernadette's husbands is your favorite?
Lloyd.
Oh, well, I guess that makes sense. Connor, what about you? Lloyd is your favorite too?
Yeah. I do like Mo a lot. I mean, I don't ever want to date Mo, but you know.
No one likes Senor Obando?
I probably would have voted for him.
Senor Obando?
Yeah.
I think John Andretti is my favorite. He's the most like the men that I date.
Dan has a type. Yeah.
Rude. So rude. But unfortunately true. No shade if any of my exes are watching. Yikes. Okay, so
John Andretti has fun choreography in the stage show, so.
Yes.
So, where did the name John Andretti come from? Is that in the book?
Yes. Yeah, all of the husbands, they all have names in the book, except for Mo. I forget what the name of the man was who Mo took his place.
Gotcha.
I don't.
Because when I first heard it, I feel like I was, maybe you were like blocking it or something, and I was next to camera, and I was like, why is that name familiar? I think there's like a NASCAR driver named Mario Andretti.
Oh, okay.
Oh, this scene.
Oh, this scene.
Okay, this one had so many emotional layers because there's so much. There's like.
This was the one that made me cry.
Yeah.
Like there was just more emotion and more stakes put in it this night, I think, than I had ever seen up to that point.
Your father's own choices brought him here. And your job right now is not to worry about the past, but to keep building a future. You have graduation in less than a month.
But he's all I have.
Not anymore. You have everyone in the book club, you have the musical, and you have me. And I'm not going anywhere.
And also, kudos to Gina K, because yet again, the days leading up to opening night, Gina K was moving across the country. So she left here, we opened on a Thursday night, she left here on Monday. And so she got to California Thursday, got into her costume, got into her house, changed into her stuff, and did a performance.
On Thursday night.
On Thursday afternoon, because where she was...
Oh, yeah. She's super talented.
Also, another fun fact, Gina K and Eric are not even close to the same age. Eric laughing so much when Brittany was talking about having to kiss a 17-year-old until she realized that Brittany was talking about Eric, and she also was going to have to kiss the same... Oh, so not only did we reference Brigadoon in the show, but we also referenced Charlotte Bronte, which was the last show that Jackie did before she did this show. Well, not the last show that you did, but it was one of the previous shows that she had worked on. Was a show about Charlotte Bronte.
That was a great show. I saw it.
Thank you. And something funny, our name for our theater company was the Inspire Collaborative. So there's just so many, parallels here because we're the collaboration theater, so...
Shout out to our costumer, too, Caitlin, who made everybody look really good here. Every time I would see a new costume, I was like, man, this really embodies who this person is. She did such a great job, and she put so much time and effort into it, particularly for something that you might think on such a small screen wouldn't be noticed.
No. It was near the end of the show, because I remember pretty much everybody was on screen. And, it was Greg, when Greg was hosting the book club. And there was a moment when Lisa was talking to Greg about, the books that he had on the bookshelf, and you could just hear the cat meowing, and for me on the Zoom, I could see everybody, and so, you could see everybody who is clearly in the scene having to fight so hard, and,
Yeah. Or, the one time when she was just, sitting there being serious, and then all of a sudden you just see the cat's, tail
just came up behind
coming
her
out like this. You could, through her ear. It was so funny.
standby messages to everybody to let them know, hey, the scene's coming up, I'm going ahead and unmuting your mic so that you can be ready. And it usually comes in a amount before their scene actually starts, because I have to mute the people in the previous scene, and so if I don't have enough time to jump between them, I go ahead and unmute the next people. So
with Zach coming in, being drunk, and his line about the chips, and he would just start over and...
That was the same
chips at the office today.
Yeah. But he did the same, hand wiping, wiping in the mouth every single time. He'd be, watching the screen intently, and then, we'd be watching Dan and just some chips in the office today. I almost peed again. I was so glad I was not on the screen.
There's some chips at the office today.
Part of what Dan was talking about earlier when he was mentioning how video feeds had to stay up, because if a person's video feed goes out, whether you turn it off or if you lose connection, and it reshuffles, the person who comes back at the end, and so everybody where they're mapped gets completely reshuffled. So you have...
Turn your video off for a second and turn it back on, and you'll see how it...
We have all been shuffled.
See, so as soon as someone turned it off, that's what would happen every time.
And that's how, I don't know if it made it in, but that's how the audience ended up one time seeing Dan on the phone with somebody, and then
oh yay! And it was literally just Dan stop. That was all we...
It was really funny to watch it 3 or 4 times.
If you watched a later version, all of this got fixed in post-production, so unless you were there for the actual live stream on Thursday, then if you watched the playback Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you wouldn't have seen any of this because it got taken out. So
this scene,
we're we're not in Greg's house yet, but we're about to be in Greg's house.
About to come in on Greg's house.
And
all right.
You had
and the hysterical part of this was, and I didn't even notice this until we were about to open. Keely had picked this beautiful background for Greg's house, where you can clearly see, you know, the windows are wide open, all of the furniture was white, the walls were white, it was like blinding, right?
More space than if I had a TV.
I'll be honest, this is better than I imagined. I kind of figured you wouldn't be hosting us at all.
And why is that?
Guys never do that stuff. They don't make the big meals like at Thanksgiving. They don't usually host parties that aren't keggers.
Well, I grew up in a family of mostly women, so I guess special rules apply.
Hey, you have furniture. That's all I need.
Well, my salary at this job at the university is less than what I used to make, but I'm not that poor. Besides, I like the job,
I don't know
and people
when it
are
occurred
always
to me,
bringing...
but I just like called Dan one day and I was like, Dan, it's February.
Still waiting. Allegra's about to exit.
One of my favorite things about doing an original show like this, or one of the benefits of doing an original show where you're working with the author, is that if something doesn't work, or we figure out that there was a mess up, like with the February situation, it can be rewritten without having to change anything or violate any kind of copyright law or anything like that. There were a lot of moments where the cast themselves contributed lines to scenes. You know, they would ad-lib, and I just loved it, and I would keep it.
Northanger Abbey was the only other Jane Austen book I had read besides Pride and Prejudice, and I remember not liking it very much. So when Allegra goes on her maybe this time around, because I do intend on reading them all, it's the raison d'etre of this book club, right?
Damn right it is.
Yep, but I've got some other ones. Memorial Day, so it's Nicholas Sparks time. But...
Oh, yes!
Lord.
Do you know? Okay.
I just bought $70 worth of Stephen King books to cleanse my palate from you saying that you're going to read a Nicholas Sparks book.
Yes, you did.
Today.
I have to do something. I want to... Oh, my God, sorry. No, you're fine, you're fine. I just want to tell you, one of my other passion projects, this kid, and this is yet another one that I think needs to be a musical.
Hours worth of tutorial videos, and one of the questions you always regularly giving students rides to and from activities. This is the moment where if anyone saw the two of them in the car together, like, she's done, she's out.
And again, this is I think right here, or she's about to start. Only must she be that she feels like she can tell this like really traumatic stuff that her mom did to this teenager.
And that's what breaks the ear. You see Trey be vulnerable, and I'm just hurting for him.
That's really hard, I think. That's something that's not talked about very often either. We kind of, in American society, I think in a way almost like fetishize this idea of like the teacher-student relationship. It's
for teacher?
Yes.
To convince ourselves that this can become romantic.
There's just so much about this show that I had to change, even messing with storylines. For instance, Jocelyn's storyline is a lot more serious, but I opted more to cut out some of her backstory to give us more room for characters like Greg and Allegra and people who didn't get as much of a backstory, like in the movie version, because Karen's work is chock full of great backstory, and there's just no way to fit it all in a show. I mean, the show is already 2.5 hours long, so.
Which, by the way, a lot of audience members loved Sylvia.
There's a lot of people that identified with her story. I did get some feedback, though, that our version of Sylvia, who was essentially Eleanor from Sense and Sensibility, that Sylvia is quite a bit of a departure from Eleanor, which I do agree. I think that she is in the book as well. Amy Brenneman, portraying her in the movie, did a really good job of bringing her back toward where Eleanor is in the books. A little bit more reserved, more afraid to show her feelings up front until she trusts. is a little bit more reactive. She shows her emotions a little bit more upfront than your typical portrayal of Eleanor would.
Wait, Dan, are you soliciting rewrite things right now? Just because the only thing is that, like, I didn't feel like at the very beginning there was...
Yet again, another benefit of doing a show that's being written as it's being workshopped. I've done both, because I've done 2 original shows now that have been being written as I was in them. And I loved the experience.
Oh, it's the grocery store FaceTime scene.
I love this.
So, fun fact about this scene is not what happened on opening night. This is a dress rehearsal, and when she...
Well, you never message me during daylight hours. Also, quick question. Does this eggplant look ripe to you?
Isn't that an avocado? Was that on purpose?
I honestly didn't know, because her video was so garbled on opening night that we had to go back and put in the video from the dress rehearsal, and she may have just been fooling around, but I couldn't tell. Another creepy little tidbit, that little moment with Olivia and the mask, where she puts on the mask when Canberra says she's sick. I wrote this show in January while I was in Mexico. I had no idea that there was going to be a pandemic, and that within 2 months, everyone was going to be wearing masks.
And then coronavirus happened.
Outrageous.
And I was like,
Dan, does that mean if we, like, look for clues?
Yes!
I'm not even on screen yet.
We're gonna move Zach over so we can see Brittany's debut and the beautiful wind that rustles through her hair and her eyelashes.
I was swooning over
hold on, I am ready for me.
Here's the debut. Here we go.
I'm now on screen. At this point, I have left the fan on because I'm at the beach. Like, I'll leave the fan on screen. You'll be able to get a better shot of the wind in my hair.
It's crazy. And I didn't. Why does she really look like she's at the beach? And then I was like,
You'll see when you get home, in case there's some kind of book club meeting, morning period thing that you have to go to, whatever. All my love.
How sweet.
When we were watching the playback the first time, this was the moment Brittany said she got the biggest compliment of her life. Zach and I were talking about who she looked like, and Zach said she looked like Liv Tyler. And I was like, oh my god, that's it! She looks just like her!
But it wasn't in the script. So when I read it, the first read-through, there was you two are going to come downstage and you're going to have your moment down here. And then, you guys have your own music, kind of like Bernadette gets for each of her husbands, whatever. And I was like, okay, cool. And he was like, so pretty much just going to have, like, a really big makeout right here.
Is that what I said?
Yes!
A really big makeout.
You're gonna, like, go for it. Like, you're really gonna, like, make out with him here. And I was like, excuse me? And I turned so red.
Well, here we are. Last scene. Again, one of the most technically difficult, because we had to slowly take everyone off stage as they said their lines. And I had given some instruction on how everyone was supposed to fold their books and look up at me, and I could cue them off, and no one did it on opening night. We just kind of cascaded everyone off as quickly as we could. Keely was like, oh my gosh. I can't believe we made it through all of that in any kind of semblance of order. But all in all, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And Sylvia's ending right here, it was perfect. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this cast commentary. And I love you all. Can't wait to see you back for the show in September. We hope that you'll come out and support us and come check out some of our other original shows here at Collaboration Theater.